Tales from the Whistling Pixie, written as told by Fallon Loreseeker. The Goblin Wars. Should be all right now, Helmet said once he reached the lower point of the passage. The three men nodded and took deep breaths. They had come away with only slight lightheadedness. Derek pulled out his tinderbox and struck the flint. All four squinted and drew their heads back into their shoulders, waiting for an explosion. When none came, the knight struck it again and again until the tinder caught. He relit his torch and smiled. "That's better," he said, holding it up to cast light down the tunnel. They untied the rope and pressed forward the same way as before, the dwarf leading and the others following. Helmet looked back over his shoulder. "Should be just up ahead," he said, pointing down the passage. "Prepare yourselves." Derek drew his sword, holding the torch in his left hand, his shield hanging from his pack. He glanced over his shoulder and sighed. He felt naked without it. He looked back to see Eldon pulling his own blade and sliding his hand into his shield strap. A scant flash of jealousy crossed the dark-haired knight's eyes at the sight. Further back, Auric was struggling to draw his large two-handed sword over his shoulder. Once free, he held it in both big hands, raising it slightly, only for the tip to clang against the rock ceiling above. His shoulders slumped, and he exhaled deeply. Derek grinned as the big man shoved the blade back into its sheath and drew a dagger from his belt instead. Auric looked up, caught Derek staring, and raised both hands in a questioning shrug of surrender. The knight looked back to the dwarf. "Let's press on," he said, chin tipping down the passage. The dwarf nodded and continued moving. They passed another side pass, and Helmet went a short distance down it before returning. "Me don't see anything down there," he said, taking his place at the point again and leading him down the main passage. 5 minutes later, the smell of decay hit their nostrils. Shortly after, they found its source, a bloated corpse of a goblin lying right where the sappers had been working. The dwarf moved around the main passage, studying the wooden support posts set every few feet. "Knock one of them down, and the whole thing falls," he said, walking back over to the others. Derek was already kneeling beside the goblin's corpse, examining it. He looked up as the dwarf approached. "Looks like pickles," he said, standing. "Why didn't the sappers just drop the roof?" Auric asked once Helmet reached them. Before the dwarf could answer, Derek pointed to a small crack in the tunnel wall. "Didn't have time," he said, moving over to it. "They opened this, and the goblins came out." Helmet nodded. "Methinks the goblins were waiting just on the other side. Most likely they heard the digging and by chance came to see what the noise was when the passage opened up. Lucky for the sappers, there weren't many, but the goblins injured a few of them, one badly, before they were forced to retreat." Auric scratched his red beard. "Once the goblins retreated, why didn't they drop the roof then?" he asked, walking over to one of the pillars. Helmet walked over beside him. "Take that out, and the whole thing falls in your head. Got to drop it from a distance, and they had wounds to worry about. Plus, the goblins weren't gone. They only fell back, probably waiting for reinforcements." The big man nodded. "Makes sense," he said, eyeing the post. "We could drop it and be done with it." The dwarf moved over and ran a hand up and down the wood. "Could, but me nor ye be suppers. Me not sure if ye pull one or more," he grinned. "Besides, what fun would that be?" He moved over to the crack, motioning with his head to what lay beyond. "Who knows how many of the little buggers are doing there?" Eldon moved a short way down the main passage, staring into the dark for a few moments before he spoke. He turned back to the others. "First, I think we need to find what lies ahead before we decide where we are going. He turned and pointed down the tunnel. If you would, Helmet, could you travel down that way and see what's there? Last time we went that way, they narrowed the passage. Lost a couple of nights before we broke through, and then had a retreat once we found the main warren. The dwarf moved up beside him. Aye, same happened when we tried. But me'll go see what be down there, he said, looking up at the night before starting down the tunnel. Derek moved up beside Eldon. And Helmet, be careful. Don't do anything reckless, he said, giving the dwarf a grin. Helmet stopped and looked back. Reckless? Me? Never, he said, returning the grin, then turned and disappeared in the darkness. He moved as quietly as could, which wasn't all that quiet. He traveled slowly, and after many long minutes, he could see light ahead. He paused. Why did the goblins have fire, he wondered. They could see just as well as he could in the dark. He crept closer and could finally make out two goblins' guards, bows in their hands. He paused again, studying the scene. They were alert, staring down the passage. The light from the braziers beside each one struck him as odd. They could see farther and sharper if they stood in the dark and used their own eyes the way he did. Fire was blinding them to anything beyond its glow. He crept closer. Could he get close enough to take both of them out? Maybe, he thought. He pressed his body against the wall and edged forward. A smell made him stop. He looked around, sniffing the air. It was coming from below him. He knelt and touched a gloved hand to the ground and brought it up to his nose. Oil, he whispered to himself. He thought about getting closer, but then he'd be standing in the firelight himself. He remembered the words Derek had given him and grinned. He would heed them, for once. He crept slowly back. No need to start a fight he couldn't end quickly. If others were waiting beyond the choke point, he'd be found out and trouble would follow. He moved back, and once he was sure he wouldn't be seen, he turned and hurried to the others. Well? Eldon asked as soon as he arrived. The dwarf stopped right in front of him. The passage is still narrow. We only saw 2 guards, but who knows if there are more beyond the choke point. And it seems they be more terrified of your kind than mine. They got fire pits and oil spread across the floor. Oric chuckled. Why does that mean? They're terrified of us, and not you. Helmet looked at him. They and me kind can see in the dark better than we can in the light. So, if they got light burning, they be more scared of ye than me. He gave a humble shrug. Interesting, Eldon said, taking a few steps in that direction. We know it lies just beyond, but we don't know where that warren, he pointed to the crack, links up. He turned back to the dwarf and nodded toward it. Helmet? Helmet looked at him. So, me gets to go see where it be leading, he said with a grin. And Helmet, Derek called after him. The dwarf looked back. Me knows, nothing reckless. Don't you be worrying. Me too pretty to be rushing into danger, he said, stepping through the crack. The 3 knights snickered quietly.